Imagine looking into the sky and seeing something impossible. Not 10 birds, not 100, not even 1,000. Millions. A living river of wings stretching across the horizon, so enormous that it could take hours for the entire flock to pass overhead. This was once the passenger pigeon, a bird so abundant that early observers described the skies as becoming dark when its enormous flocks flew overhead. And yet, today, there isn't a single wild passenger pigeon left. In fact, the species is completely extinct. How could a bird that once numbered in the billions disappear so quickly? The answer is one of the most disturbing stories in the history of wildlife. Chapter 1. The bird that filled the sky. Before modern cities covered North America, vast forests stretched across much of the eastern United States and Canada. And inside those forests lived one of the most numerous birds ever known. The passenger pigeon. At first glance, it looked surprisingly ordinary. It had a small head, a long tail, reddish-brown feathers, and a body shaped much like other pigeons. But its numbers were anything but ordinary. Scientists estimate that passenger pigeons once numbered in the billions. Some estimates suggest they may have represented a huge portion of all land birds in North America. They traveled in enormous flocks, searching for forests filled with their favorite foods, especially acorns, beech nuts, seeds, and berries. And when these birds moved, they moved together. Thousands became millions. The forest itself seemed to come alive. Chapter 2. When the sky turned dark. Imagine standing in a small 19th century American town. You look upward. The sky begins to change. At first, you hear distant wing beats. Then the sound grows louder and louder. Suddenly, the sunlight disappears. A massive flock is passing overhead. The birds continue flying for minutes, then tens of minutes, then even longer. Witnesses described passenger pigeon flocks as so enormous that they could appear like dark clouds moving across the sky. Their numbers created one of nature's greatest spectacles, but their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Passenger pigeons depended heavily on enormous flocks. They gathered together to feed, travel, and reproduce. That strategy worked extremely well when their population was massive. But humans discovered something dangerous. If you could kill hundreds of birds at once, you didn't have to chase them individually. You could simply wait for the flock. Chapter 3. The Age of Mass Hunting. During the 19th century, North America was changing rapidly. Railroads expanded. Cities grew. Markets connected distant regions. And passenger pigeons became a valuable source of cheap meat. Professional hunters began targeting enormous flocks. They used nets, guns, traps, and other methods to kill large numbers of birds. Sometimes, hunters would locate a nesting colony containing thousands or even millions of pigeons. Then they would attack. The birds were captured and transported to markets. Because the pigeons were so numerous, people assumed there was no possible way humans could eliminate them. That assumption was catastrophically wrong. The technology of the time made mass hunting easier. Railroads allowed hunters to reach distant nesting grounds, and refrigerated transportation allowed meat to be shipped farther. The passenger pigeon had gone from being almost unimaginably abundant to becoming a commercial resource, and the killing accelerated. Chapter 4. The forests were disappearing too. But hunting wasn't the only problem. The passenger pigeon's world was changing. Across eastern North America, forests were being cleared for farms, towns, roads, and expanding cities. The birds depended on enormous forests that could provide enough food for their gigantic populations. As those forests disappeared, their habitat became fragmented. The pigeons could no longer rely on the same massive food supplies, and something even more dangerous happened. Their population began to shrink. At first, nobody panicked. Why would they? A species with billions of individuals seemed impossible to destroy. But passenger pigeons had a biological problem. They had evolved to survive through enormous numbers. When their population became smaller, their reproductive strategy became much less effective. They often nested in huge colonies. Their social behavior depended on massive groups. And when those groups disappeared, the species couldn't simply switch to living like a solitary bird. The very strategy that had made them incredibly successful for thousands of years became a vulnerability in a human-dominated world. Chapter 5. From billions to millions. By the late 19th century, the decline became increasingly obvious. But the birds were still being hunted. people continued searching for the remaining flocks. And every year, there were fewer birds. The incredible abundance that once made the passenger pigeon seem invincible was disappearing. Think about that for a moment. A species can survive for thousands of years. It can adapt to predators. It can survive storms, disease, winter, and natural disasters. But it may still disappear within a few human generations. Not because of one dramatic catastrophe, but because the pressure never stops. More hunting, less habitat, smaller populations, fewer breeding colonies, and eventually, fewer birds capable of finding one another. The passenger pigeon was entering a downward spiral. Chapter 6. The Last Great Flocks. By the early 20th century, the passenger pigeon was almost gone. The massive flocks that once darkened the skies had vanished. The bird that had been impossible to ignore became almost impossible to find. Small groups survived in captivity and in isolated locations. But the wild population had collapsed. One of the most famous surviving birds was eventually named Martha. She lived at the Cincinnati Zoo. For years, she was considered one of the last passenger pigeons alive. Visitors came to see her. But there was something heartbreaking about the situation. Martha was surrounded by people, and yet she was alone. There were no great flocks, no endless forests filled with millions of her kind, no massive chorus of wings, just one bird carrying the final chapter of an entire species. Chapter 7, September 1st, 1914. Then came the moment that officially ended the species. On September 1st, 1914, Martha died at the Cincinnati Zoo. She was approximately 29 years old. Her death marked the extinction of the passenger pigeon. A bird that had once numbered in the billions was gone. Completely gone. There would be no recovery. No hidden population waiting in a remote forest. No final flock returning in spring. The passenger pigeon had disappeared from Earth. And its extinction shocked scientists and conservationists. Because the passenger pigeon wasn't a rare animal that slowly disappeared over thousands of years. It was once one of the most abundant birds on the continent. And within a relatively short period of human history, it was gone. Chapter 8. What the passenger pigeon teaches us. The passenger pigeon story isn't simply about one extinct bird. It teaches us something deeper about nature. Abundance does not equal safety. A species can have billions of individuals and still be vulnerable. When humans see huge populations, we naturally assume there will always be more. But ecosystems don't work that way. Every species depends on food, habitat, reproduction, and a stable environment. Remove enough pieces, and even an apparently unstoppable population can collapse. The passenger pigeon also reminds us that extinction doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes there is no single day when everything changes. Instead, the population gets slightly smaller, then smaller again. The forests become fragmented. The breeding colonies disappear. The flocks become harder to find. And eventually, the silence arrives. Conclusion: the bird we can never see again. Today, you can see pigeons almost anywhere. On sidewalks, on rooftops, in parks, around cities. But among all those pigeons, there is one species you will never see. The passenger pigeon. No matter how carefully you search, no matter how remote the forest, no matter how large the flock, the passenger pigeon is gone. And perhaps the most haunting part of its story is this. People once believed there were simply too many passenger pigeons to ever disappear. They were wrong. The species that once darkened the skies became a museum specimen, a photograph, a preserved body, a memory. Its story reminds us that nature's abundance can create an illusion of permanence. And sometimes, by the time we realize a species is disappearing, it is already too late. The passenger pigeon once ruled the skies of North America. Now, it exists only in history.
Why do birds
and that
fly
may be
south
its
for the winter?
greatest lesson of all.
Because it is
Nothing
way
in
too
nature
far
is
to walk for them,
guaranteed to last
especially with
forever.
all that traffic
If you
in the
enjoyed
city
this
park.
journey into the hidden history of birds, subscribe for more stories about bird intelligence, evolution, survival, and the mysteries of the natural world. Because some of the most incredible stories in nature are the ones we can never witness again.